Welcome everyone to another episode of Data as the Fourth Pillar, the Board and CXO Briefing. Today we are very excited to, for the first time, to welcome two guests. One of them, our very own case study author from our book, Ruediger Eck, Chief Data Officer of Audi Production.
Indeed. And our second guest today is Thomas Husslein, who's the CEO of Optware. I think both Rudiger and Thomas come also from a very distinguished background, from parts of physics and biomedical spaces, and also have a huge role to play in data. So I think this episode is going to be a great watch and a listen for our viewers and listeners. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Data as the Fourth Pillar podcast, which is meant for boards and CXO briefing. Today, we are very excited to join two guests with us. So, as we move ahead, welcome Thomas and Rudiger to this session.
Hi, Zuche. Hi, Sid. Hello, everyone from Munich.
So, if we could kick off, Rudiger and Thomas, if you could introduce yourself. Rudiger, please go ahead.
I'm Ruediger. I'm leading the data and our activities at Audi Production. And I've been involved in dealing with data and I for almost 10 years now. Originally, I'm not an IT guy, so I'm coming from a mechanical engineering background. And I started, I'm an automotive guy, I would say, and I started in production planning originally and was looking into machinery, equipment planning, that kind of stuff for the automotive, was touring the globe quite an extensive time, ramping up different facilities. I was originally with Mercedes for 15 years, and I moved to Audi about 10 years ago. And I think what drives me is I think this incredible difficulty to handle data. I think is the managing that challenge in the business that I find quite exciting. And I work a lot with Thomas. And Thomas is running an optimization company, and I think he's a good guy to tell you why we need data.
Great.
So, thank you for that nice introduction. My name is Thomas. I founded Optware 25 years ago, and Optware stands for optimization software. So we started this with the vision to improve industrial processes using algorithms. So I'm the core and algorithm guy, started in simulation and later then in optimization. And what you found is you must be able to calculate decisions efficiently. And this we are doing since 25 years, and you have to combine data and algorithms in a way so that things are reliable, easy to use. And this is what I'm doing. And right now, I said we're living in interesting times. There are two, for our company, Optware, there are two major, disruptions coming ahead. The one is AI, and AI in the sense that it's a new algorithms that solves optimization problems. And it's also a way to easier use these algorithms or use these things. And the second is quantum computing, which is not the topic of today, but I want to mention it. It will provide significantly advanced computation power, which also will be disruptive. And before I did Optware, I was at IBM Yorktown in the US for 5 years, working there on simulations, large-scale simulations in physics there, and also in biomedicine. That was my background.
Awesome. So we have both physics, biomedicine background and mechanical engineer background, but all roads eventually lead to data in a way. So that's probably what we should discuss next. So both of you have wide experience, and I've seen data, I guess, from different lenses, both in your current and previous roles. How do you feel data, especially in the context, as Sujay mentioned, we are primarily wanting to talk to C-suite business leaders, CEOs like yourself, Thomas. So how do you see from a very top level, how do you see the perception of data is today maybe versus a few years ago? Has it changed? Is it still the same? What are your thoughts? Maybe You can go in any order.
Well, if I start, I would say everyone's agreeing on the headline, I'd say. So everyone says, yeah, data is super important. We need to do something. And we see all the tools and everything it can do. But really understanding the challenge, I think that's a very limited number of people, I would say, who actually understand what's the, the core of the problem. And maybe that's also different from I would say, data legacy companies such as ours and many businesses that have been around for many years. But I think just from that perspective, I think people are not quite understanding why everything is taking so long, why it's so difficult, why is it not moving ahead, why are we not seeing all the business cases that were promised, why can't we make better use of our data? And myself being an engineer, a mechanical engineer originally, when I kind of first got into contact with IT or deeper contact and data and AI, I was actually surprised that there's very little proven methodology in terms of how you describe certain problems, how you solve certain problems. Not so much talking about the algorithms, but kind of the language, the methodology that surrounds data. So if I may, if you take an engineering exercise and you have a piece of a machine, you would have like a 3D model, you would have a drawing, you would have your pneumatics, your schematics, you would have your electrical drawings, and you would have your code and your SPS code that it describes how the machine should behave. And then when you look at IT and data and how certain things are developed, you find there's very little standardized documentation or methodology of how you actually develop it. And that's because the technology is moving so rapidly. So there has never been quite, I would say, the time to describe things appropriately. There's not so much standardization. And I think that's not understood by the majority of the people who come in from outside of IT. And when you actually dive a bit deeper then into certain problems, people start to understand, yeah, okay. For the first time, I'm getting this understanding why things are more difficult than I thought they would be. So I think to answer your question, I think on a headline, everyone agrees we should do something, but in reality, things are not moving as we want them to move. And I see an element of frustration as well, where people say, "Is it really worth investing so much money into all these things? Is it too much overhyped?" I think that's probably the state of data at the moment. Thomas, what do you think?
What I think, well, I think data is always expensive to you to collect data in a sophisticated way or the way to use. So it's always driven by an outside use case to collect data. As I said, quality, for instance, always has good data, but it comes from regulations that say you have to do this. And when I look at this 25 years of doing AI projects, I always said, when I started, I talked to an old professor of operations research, and they said, well, you will not do much of your algorithms work. You will always do data warehouse projects. I mean, there were no lakes and no other constructs. There were always data warehouses where we would consolidate the data from different places to make use of it. And to a certain extent, this hasn't changed much. I mean, there's an awareness that we have to do it differently, but we have all these systems that we are living in this brownfield, context, and to really and everybody's, I think, trying to find out what is the smallest fix so we can use our data for the AI age, and use it very much from a cost effective process. That's what I would say.
Interesting. And I think what caught me in introduction, Thomas, you said you are the algo guy. And there's all this hype about AI today that even a basic algorithm is called as an AI today, right? So you must be saying why you're screaming about AI today. I've been working on AI for the past 25 years or so, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit. I mean, AI is for me an algorithm that has is a new algorithm that has pros and cons. I mean, the pros are it's more flexible than algorithms we used before. The concept, it's less understandable and less reproducible, and the precision is lacking. So it's just another, for me, it's just another algorithm to achieve the same goal, calculate decisions. And I think to make a decision, also a human must collect data. A human calls it usually information, and bring the information to a decision point. And I think that's the idea, what AI forces you to do to get the data to a decision point. Whereas what we collected data before was to protocol things, to do bookkeeping, to store information, but not to bring information together from different angles or from different sources to do a decision. That's a different task. And this, I think, many people misunderstand when they think of data. Yeah, data is, I have a database, I have a name, I have an address, I have a phone number, and then maybe I have a machine, I collect the specs of the machine, and maybe the process data of that machine. But what an AI, of course, needs get all these different types of data coherently together, and I mean, that's what you usually forget, I think.
And then do you see the senior management, even Ruediger in Audi or Thomas, the managed CXOs or the boards that you interact with, do they have this realization that all this type of data is required to become successful with AI?
Well, I think that there's two ways of looking at it. One is if you're in a particular functional silo in your business, let's say you're in manufacturing and you're in assembly or something, then the understanding is limited to, I'd say, what is actually happening in that value stream. And it's quite logical that you obviously need all that data to solve a particular problem. And I think there's a certain level of understanding. I think when it becomes more as a transformational element, that's much more difficult. So when you look at it from a perspective, say, we want to develop new capabilities across the business, across different functions in the business. Let's say we want to connect, in a simpler example, let's say assembly and manufacturing data across the manufacturing business. I think that's much more complex, but I think there's an understanding because you're still in the same domain. But now when you want to start, let's say, connect sales and production data, sales, production, and procurement data, you have no natural anchor in your business who has got that holistic view onto the problem other than your CEO, who obviously is interested in optimizing the overall business. So you need to convince people that they willingly contribute data products so other people can do something with it, and you don't even know exactly what type of data you actually need when you start out from. So that perspective is not only a data and an organizational problem, it's also a transformational effort. So you're trying to actually enable different elements of your business to be connected through data, and you don't know exactly what data and what data quality you need when you start out. So you have this iterative approach that you need to collect data, see if it's good enough, and still keep people interested, because this is naturally taking some time. So I think that, and we're working heavily towards that. This is what we think data is actually doing. It is actually helping you to transform your business, to connect parts and dots in the business that previously were not connected. And I think that element is difficult to convey because, as I said before, there's no proven methodology. There's no proven tool that you say, if you use that tool, you will get that result. So you may well find out that there's nothing in the data that actually will solve your problem. You can speculate about it, but is it good enough? Is it timely enough? Has it got the right quality? Have you organized ownership? Is cost and benefit in a good proportion, in a good relation? I think that's what my role is mostly about, to enable the business to have like a common understanding, agreed understanding of what we're trying to do, and to continuously support us in that on that journey.
That's a very critical and interesting point, and that's where larger companies face that complexity more, because you are more different business areas and different ways of working. So the sharing must be increased to get all these aspects of data to maximize leverage of the holistic data, not just one business function data to get the maximum benefits from AI, right?
Yeah, I think it brings out the best and the worst in companies.
Yeah,
That's a good way of describing it. So, if your company is really good at collaborating, is really good at being driven by a common vision, by something that we all share, by a good cultural element, by giving and taking without keeping a balance sheet all the time, let's put it that way.
yeah,
If you're good at that, then you will just be so much faster. If you are organized in silos and they struggle to cooperate because they struggle to agree a common goal, every single failure will just question the whole journey.
exactly.
So that's why it's not at all a technical problem. It's much more a transformational effort, I think.
And thus it becomes an imperative for the CEO to take charge of it to make it happen, right? So they have a role to play there.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It's really having a continuously vested interest in a certain problem, and to pursue it and to give focus and say, okay, these are two problems we would like to solve in a given time frame, and really continuously be interested in where do we need to give and take, because everything will be a problem. Financing will be a problem. How do we cross finance things between different companies, maybe even in a larger enterprise such as ours, but in different departments? How do you organize that one side has a benefit and the other side has additional effort because they maybe need to operate that? How do you balance it between your general operational efforts, your investments that you're doing in the core part of the business, against what are you taking to finance an uncertain part of business development? Really, how do you deal with the fact that these new projects will actually need new teams that will operate them because they are not naturally organized in the business? How do you keep working on them, knowing that this problem, once it's been addressed and solved, will need continuous effort to keep it up to standards? So all these questions, if you try to solve that from a business function alone or an IT function, it's just impossible. Yeah.
Indeed. And just to pick your brains as well on this, Thomas, and let's also maybe take a couple of practical examples, because I know the C-suite also wants to hear what is the tangible outcomes from having data. So, Thomas, for instance, I can imagine, since you are building complex algorithms, especially linked to automotive, having a lot of automotive related data, whether it's synthetic but ideally real, will be beneficial. But also I can imagine the semantic context, so what each of these data points mean and how they are interlinked. I guess those would also be key foundation for the algorithms to be more improved. So the question is, if you had the right data with the right context, what would be the kind of improvements Optware could do? Could you give us some examples without giving all your secrets away, of course?
Yeah, well, we have coined some phrases for that. So when we get a process optimization into practice using algorithms and data, we can easily save 20% of production cost. And we've seen that across many different examples, from the shop floor to also medium range plannings, where you decide between different locations where to produce what and how to flexibilize that, when to shift production. And that's really a rather, yeah, it seems to be a motivation or things. I mean, today, or we come out of an era of lean. Everything had to be lean. I mean, that's also what Ringsberg and Ruediger said. We are efficiency driven. Everything, we were very, very successful in production when we betted on efficiency. Everything had to be more efficient. And of course, every failure is a real problem with efficiency. And that is, I think, the era of lean is ending. And that's the thing. And what makes it happen? It makes happen that sometimes decisions are once in a year firefight, or once in a month firefight, to get everything together, make a decision, and that has to be than the set of the rule for a year or a month. But with all the rapid changes in the world, you have to make the decisions more often, more faster. And then you cannot have people gathering the data manually or with getting them out of some databases. You have to have that at your fingertip. And that is really an advantage here you have. And we have done this with press shops that are distributed around the world. We've done this for automizing laboratories where everybody said you cannot control more than 2 machines because no lab assistant is able to convey this in his head, the complexity of the things, and you don't want to make mistakes in a medical lab. You can when you have a good basis on data, you can control a higher level of complexity, and then gives you either, when you have your system at the boundary of what you can control, you can get it more efficiently, like the 20% I said, or you are even capable of conveying a new process or a new competitive advantage because you can suddenly do something nobody else can do, or can do with a cost-efficient manner. And that's, I think, is what people have to say. And I want also to connect to Ruediger on another point. It's the usual coffee break argument of optimization. If I make a planning process 10% more efficient, what have I gained from that? Do I really then create money out of it? I mean, does at the end, am I producing more cars, or am I producing more products, or have I only enlarged the coffee break of some workers and others I didn't? That's the question, but I has to say, and that means if I really want to use AI to improve my cost structure and my competitiveness, I have to change processes. So the one thing is, data enables me to use AI, but then I have to go the next step, to go into a change process, to go into a mindset process, to really say, so now I want to change these processes significantly. Like when I connect silos, I mean, there was a reason why our organization chose silos.
Yeah.
There is a reason for that. I mean, everybody knows it's not too efficient, and we are at the boundary of efficiency, but there's a reason for that.
It was efficient for a long time, and because that's your operational value stream, right? I mean, that's why you build a silo, so people can focus on their capabilities and solve these problems day to day. I think, and now that you're overlaying another layer in a matrix, that somebody's looking at data who doesn't care about silos, and how do you manage that? I think there's maybe to pick up on the CEO question, how well do people understand it? I think there's two types of companies, I think, and how you attack these problems. One is, I'm not saying that one is better than the other necessarily, but I think one is, you say, okay, we see a certain business case across, let's say, 5 silos that we want to leverage with data. And then you start digging through that business case, you're integrating data, you're providing data, you're developing solution, you're bringing all the teams together, everything I said before. And you potentially have to justify a lot about the business value added in that particular project, cost management, value added, and so forth. The other element is that you say we have like a paradigm. They say, if we make the business's data available in a structured and organized manner, we can democratize data. Everybody can contribute to improving the company on a day-to-day business. You will struggle potentially much more in validating any business case, because initially this will cost you quite a bit of money to integrate a lot of data. But it will help you, if you believe in data solving your problems, it will be probably much faster to do it that way. But there's a higher chance of also integrating data that you may not need. There's a higher chance of losing focus. There's a higher chance of people working on projects that may never deliver anything of value. I think there's 2 ways of doing that. I think traditionally, probably our company and probably the whole industry would go for option A, to say we want to leverage a business case. But I think you also need a portion of variant B, because otherwise you will have more or less a serial process where you finish one business case to the end and then you start integrating more data. And that again is another challenge that you need to drive from a CEO perspective, is continuously asking yourself, what's the right strategy? What's the right approach? Because it could last years. And every day is a lost day where you don't improve your process with data.
Yeah, exactly. And as Rudiger and Thomas, you were saying, Thomas, you also spoke about the process part of it, and now AI is a technology coming in, the data, and Rudiger and Thomas, you spoke about the people and the culture of the organization. So this is actually a business level transformation that companies needs to do in all together, the people, the process, then bringing in the new tech like AI, and then bringing the data together. In the book, like we talk about QCS for data intensity, it is quality, then compliance, and then the speed of data. So hence it does become a CEO level transformation that they need to do across all these aspects. But it might be too overwhelming as well. So how should companies or CEOs looking at dice this problem statement, and where should they focus on? Because to achieve your goals and objective, like Rudiger, you said, for to get the business impact, but it might need process changes. The new tech comes in, you need to do the data. So too much to do.
Yeah. Well, as always, understanding is the first step, right? If you don't, it's very difficult, to be honest, to understand it without doing it. So you need to be conceptually very strong to understand, I think, what the problems will be just from reading good books about it. It certainly helps when you're in, but I'm not sure whether that's sufficient. I think the next step is really understanding that you need to develop certain capabilities, and you can do them simultaneously because they're distributed across the business. So, and I think to be successful with it, you really need to develop the capabilities. Like, for example, we started very much from a data engineering point of view. And I'm by no means saying that's the best approach, but that's probably what most companies do. They try to get access to data, then they build solutions, and they're happy they solved a certain problem, and that's great. And while you're doing that, you're forgetting all these other capabilities, how to manage FinOps, for example, so the financial impact, how to manage cost and value, how do I integrate data sensibly so it's sustainable, how do I develop my architecture at the same time, and so forth. And so I think you, after maybe a year or so into the journey, you really need to look at your capability landscape, and you need, at that point, you need to understand, okay, we need to develop all these capabilities. Who's leading what capability? And I think if you do it that way, together with good business cases that give you some success, I think that's the best chance you get. But many companies are struggling to maintain that strategic momentum over time because there's naturally going to be some operational issue that's distracting you. And it's a really tough strategic journey that you need to move on. And people, obviously, like in larger enterprises as ours, people change, new people come in, processes change, organizational changes come, people come and go. So maintaining that over time is really.
So you need the commitment and the long-term view to make it happen. Yeah, Thomas, you want to add something to that? Your perspectives?
Yeah, I agree on that on a very large scale. I mean, today, if you are a CEO, it's very difficult to make decisions because you see the AI is transforming things, but you can expect that the transformation is not over right now. So what's the advantage of being a first mover versus being somebody that's waiting for things to settle, to things become cheaper, more templated? That's a real issue, I think, for CEOs, when to invest their money on the thing. On the other hand, I agree with Ruediger. It's about capabilities, and it's about where is data in the organization located? Is data the task of the IT business? So what usually people say, yeah, you have the storages, there's the database, and you're the IT guys, you have to take care of the data. But that's only the technical part. I think you have to make sure that the operational functions view data as their business. Of course, not where to store it and how to maintain it and archive it, whatever. That's not, but to see data as a result of their work. Let's say, as I come back to one of our projects where we do where we are in a lab and we're automizing testing some blood samples. So what's the result of that production? It's testing. You have like a little production. You manipulate the thing. You put in some chemicals, and you make some measurements and to add other chemicals and you heat it and whatever. It's a real process. And at the end, the only result is data. You have that whatever level of cholesterol in it, you have that antibodies there. It's only data that is the result. And that, I think, many functions must say the result of my work is maybe getting a piece of metal being transformed into a product, but it's also creating data on that product. We say, for instance, one of our biggest problem, I might be deterring a little, is when you have a mass production and you're producing a part, you have machines that go up and down and produce something, and then at some point you do a quality measurement. And then you realize, okay, quality measurement was such and such. If you really want to improve that process, you must say, oh, I measured this part, it has these quality measures, and I know on machine one, the oil temperature was this, the electrical current was this exactly for that part. And if you cannot match these data with each other, you will not improve this process. And that's what people have to put in mind, that data is part of their product. And that's why I like this. Data is the fourth pillar. It's not a technical thing the IT has to take care of. It is part of what people produce in their daily work. They produce data. And it's part, of course, of communication to collaborate with each other, but it's also part of what they produce as a product.
Well said. In a way, it's like I almost imagine the way you are saying it, Thomas, like a systems thinking approach, right? So when you're starting to build your data as a fourth pillar, you need to almost think of data as a system, and to connect to Ruediger's point, a system which cascades across the business functions and processes and not get tied up in this. Just want to double click on small and medium sized businesses, Thomas. I mean, uh, we understood Rudiger's perspective from a large enterprise perspective. Let's assume some of our listeners are part of a C suite of a SMB company. They obviously have the benefit a bit that they don't have the legacy of a big company. So they have the benefit, they could start managing data strategically, but they also have the challenge a bit because they are working with a very lean organization. They do not have maybe the resources or the amount of data people that maybe a large organization has. So how should a C-suite, like a CEO of a SMB big, company, how should they structure their data program, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, that there are two answers to that. The one thing is, of course, SMEs have a lot of advantages. SMEs are not so strongly structured around processes as larger companies adopt to control their complexity and to manage their complexity. So usually people have more freedom to elaborate things, to try out things, and to get ideas into working. So that's the advantage, and the people are allowed more things. As on the other side, as you said, the small and medium companies usually are very lean, very focused on their product, to be champion in one small part of the market and defend that region. So they're very, very focused on the product, the quality of the product, and the competitiveness of the product. So for them, it is a very new thinking of getting AI into it. And what we are concentrating when we're working with small and medium companies, they usually don't want to explore things. They want templates. They want to say, this is the way it's going to be. And then all the discussions on the shop floor or in the organization have to concentrate on then how are we going to that template. I mean, that's in a small and medium company, the strategy they have to do is not saying we have grown this production process over the last 30 years and we're cutting corner here and there and we know this machine has a specs of this, but in reality we can get out of 10% more out of it, and thus we have built our production process around all this cutting corner things to be get the last 0.5% out of it. Whereas when you want it now transformed to the data-driven production or AI-driven production, you have to go to templates to cut also old ways of doing to get a stable fundament, as Ruediger said, to be able to connect things. You have to work with templates, even if you at the beginning lose a little bit of your efficiency.
Can I pick up on that and also connect some dots to what Thomas said before about CSOs struggling to invest in these difficult times? I think the interesting thing about data that there's no bad time to invest in data because it will always be the same investment, because the investment is very people heavy, internal people heavy. So you have to start anyway. I think if you haven't started your journey of data, and if you're not planning to do so within the next 1 or 2 years, you're lost anyway, right? I think it's just impossible to drive a modern business without understanding of the data that it produces. Whether it's a bigger or smaller business doesn't matter. So get your act together. I think that's the one recommendation I have. The other thing is maybe picking up on the templates thing. I think it is much more difficult to go through this journey if you're obviously doing it for the first time. If I had to do it again, I would exactly know what to do now and I would approach things differently. Obviously, there are not so many people around that have done that journey. So pick someone who has done it and seek and accept guidance, right? I think that's really important. Get someone who's done it and follow his guidance and make it a top priority to listen to that person. And there's no bad time. And the technology will never be in a position to help you with getting your data organized anyway. It's more or less always a hard drive where your data is stored, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's a modern data management suite, whatever it is, you will need to organize your data, add meaning, add metadata to it, add semantics, ontologies, whatever, before you can do anything useful with it. So I think there's no point in waiting for, I don't know, technology to pick up. I mean, in terms of the solutions that you're building with it, obviously that will develop. But every investment in good structured data and an organization that can deliver these capabilities is a good investment, I think.
Very well said, Ruediger. And that brings to the urgency that we have tried to bring about in the book. And as Thomas was saying, AI needs that maturity in data, and you need to be on the road. You cannot just be that level by switching on a button. There's so much things you need to do from a people, culture perspective, from that process perspective, and then technology is an enabler to get that control over data. So you must be on the road right away. That's even a risk of existence for your organization because the disruptions will continue to be much more faster and higher with the AI age. So I think wonderful discussions. We have a signature question for both of you that you'd like to pose. Maybe Thomas, if you have to personify data, as a person, either be it a real relationship, a friend, or a philosopher, or a fictional character that you may like, what comes to your mind if you have to personify data for you? What is data for you as a person?
For me, data as a person is, I was thinking of, I don't know whether you know Mary Kondo, the lady that declutters your home. Yeah, you can either live in a rather cluttered home where you personally know where to find your book that you read last year and you have it in 1 minute, or you can declutter your home and have a very clear knowledge in somebody, and can somebody else tell, or he will understand your way of organizing and will find the book on its own. I was thinking of data as being the Marie Kondo.
That's a nice one, but the complexity in enterprises is there is not only one or few people living in that house, right? So if you don't do the Marie Kondo, then the same person has to be asked every time to find that lost thing in the heap of things in the house, right?
Well, but also in a family, it might be not easy to agree on the way to organize.
What would be for you, Ruediger?
What popped in my mind is, I think, the wizard and the beast. So not the beauty and the beast, but the wizard and the beast, like Gandalf the Grey coming from the sky and falling onto this heavenly, earthly place. And I think it's because the wizard is obviously can do magic, but is also a bit weird. You don't really know how he's doing it. What do you need to do to activate it? If you get it wrong, he will really distract you, destroy you potentially. You don't quite understand how it works. And a beast also, I think, because once you get into the nitty-gritty, you understand that it's actually a bit more difficult than you were thinking out from the start. And then you were looking back to the wizard again and say, can you help me? So you're in this constant battle between doing magic and, on the other hand, dealing with a beast that's not necessarily helping you. And that's what we see continuously moving between the two places. And one day we're totally happy. Yes, we've done some magic. And the next day we are just downtrodden and say, oh gosh, we've messed it up again. So it's like always a high and low following each other.
Very well said. Thank you. Very interesting, right? Different perspectives. Yeah. So maybe Sid, any closing thoughts? We could then close the discussion.
Yeah. So thanks again, Thomas and Ruediger. I mean, we could continue this conversation for a lot more topics. So really appreciate all your perspectives. Maybe for each of you to conclude, is there any parting thoughts you have, and also how can listeners reach out to you?
Well, I was writing the book so that other people get some inspiration. I'm always quite happy if people contact me and ask me for some insights, guidance, inspiration even. So I'm quite happy to talk to people about it and share the story. I think it helps to see that you're not alone on this journey and that other people are also worrying about it. And I'm also doing it from myself being a German and a European and a convinced European. I'm also doing it to support our industrial space. And I think we need to collaborate much more to solve problems together. And data is an enabler to solving problems together in a network of businesses. So yeah, I'm really inviting people to contact me if they like, and we can see what we can do.
Same for me. Of course, I was very, very happy that this book was written. I'm very positive about that book. And I'm also a little bit of the mode of giving back, because I see that production faces a major transition with the new technologies, and we have to get our things together. So I'm really, really helping people to get this. And maybe a closing thought. In 25 years, I've done a lot of projects to do decision systems. And sometimes these decision systems get switched off. You don't want this when you sell them to people, but sometimes, that's like Ruediger said, people change, cultures change, and so sometimes they get switched off. But the data warehouse below that never gets switched off. So once you have organized data on a higher level, people just are happy and use it. And maybe you have to redo your decision system above it, because processes change or people change the way they want to use it. But the data below, once you have organized it on a higher level, people will always use it and love it.
Applications come and go, and data just stays for good, doesn't it? It just
that's a good one.
Yeah, it has been. Great. So lovely talking to you, both of you. Thanks a lot for your time. I'm sure the listeners loved it, and looking forward to the collaboration and continued conversations to help the community. As you said, we're looking forward to give it back to the community so that they become successful as well. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rudiger.
Thanks for
Thanks,
having me.
Thomas. Bye bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
All right, that was such a great discussion, Sujay. I think there were great perspectives from both Rudiger and Thomas in this discussion. I mean, I have so many takeaways, so it's been difficult, I think, to choose what could be the great, things that I learned from this. But I mean, I have to prioritize. So let me start with one of the things which I think Thomas said, which has stuck with me. Uh, he mentioned right at the start that AI is just another algorithm in his opinion. Just like he's working at Optware for 25 plus years on algorithm. AI, of course, he agreed gives a huge potential and is one of the two things he's watching out for along with quantum computing. But he mentioned that it is just another algorithm, and what makes the big difference is data. And data is not just, he mentioned as something you provide for each and every AI algorithm and every AI use case. He mentioned the importance of system thinking for data, and he also, of course, linked. Happy to hear our book as a great foundation towards those system thinking concept. So I had a feeling from that discussion as a whole. So this is kind of my conclusion that it's both a scientific part to data, because you need to think about, of course, from a scientific, and also an organizational perspective, how you want to organize your data foundations, people, process, and technology around data. But there's also seems to be a huge art to how to do this, right? It can't just be something you do it just from a pure scientific perspective alone. There's a huge incentive model, as we've discussed in previous episodes. There's also something about people finding it important to gather this different kinds of data and really align towards the organizational system thinking concept that Thomas talked about.
Very well said, Sid. Yeah, I think scientific approaches are important and it's a duality. Art is also required. Like, I think we human beings are emotional, right? And whenever human beings are involved, the art aspect does comes into picture in everything that we do. And that's so about making data as a strategic asset for the organization as well. And leaning on to that, my key takeaway said, and like you said, there were so many, and we had two very great individuals joining us with so much deep experience, is when Rudiger took this large company perspective of siloed within a business function, say sales, marketing, or production. And there is a reason that these silos has been created in organizations so that every function could focus on its own role, its own capability building, and its own value delivery. However, when you come to a corporate wide transformation initiatives, which actually requires collaboration and sharing of data and information across this different business function, that's when an individual function does not have that high level view which a CXO and the board would have or a CEO would have, right? So that's very critical that when you're driving a transformation across the company and where data plays a key role, it could be like changing your go to market model, like we covered in the book, said from physical store oriented to an omni-channel. So such transformations needs a CEO's involvement. So that was a key takeaway that we have been championing, and that Rudiger actually highlighted that CEO has that view and the vision, and they must come in to drive through that transformation, which involves collaboration across different business functions.
Yeah, fully agree, Sujay. Great point. And I mean, that was very well explained by Rudiger, both in the case study in the book and in the discussion we had today.
Yeah.
But also, I felt, Sujay, this is a great point, because you and me have seen this also in our day jobs, talking to any organization in most such enterprises. When data is really, significant, it becomes a CEO level charter, versus when it's just doing well, but we've seen that it does well only in that pocket that you talked about of that enterprise, whether it's a business unit or a specific geography, etc. So very well put. My second takeaway is again something that Thomas talked about, where we discussed a little bit similar to previous episodes, but was very interesting to hear Thomas' perspective about SMBs versus larger enterprises. And he made a very important point that, in SMBs, it's much more, the goal for data and AI is much more moving towards processes which we might at large enterprises take for granted. As at SMBs, he said, called this kind of a template driven approach. So that is a kind of a key goal for them to really scale, right? To be a bigger, better selling or continuously providing the same experience, whether it's to their customers or business partners, etc. I think very important also for this clarity, because how and what are the incentives then you can attach to data and AI can be very different for an SMB compared to a larger enterprise.
Yeah, that's very true. Understanding where you are, that deriving that understanding is very critical too, which Rudiger put. And connected to that, my second key takeaway, and which we have been reiterating and highlighting in our book as well, is to start now despite the mess. And as Rudiger highlighted, there is no perfect time to invest in data. And he emphasized that technology will not fix your organization's disorganization for you. People have to do the work, and people have to lead the way, like you also mentioned, clarity of the incentive model. And that's where boards and leaderships, the CEOs becomes plays a very critical role. And to also to understand that it will be a long journey, but you must start immediately. There will be challenges and roadblocks on the way, which the senior management needs to step in to resolve. But you have to you cannot just push it to the next quarter or the next year and saying there's so much to do, I have the business pressure, there's so much mess. There is no perfect time. So getting onto the road right now is very critical if you have to continuing growing your business, and it is a matter of survival as well in this AI first stage.
Very well said, Sujay. And I think Rudiger made a very good point there. And to add to what you just said, he also mentioned something which stuck with me around most enterprises who start or embark such a huge data transformation will always find it very difficult the first time around. So he emphasized the need also for seeking guidance from people who've done this themselves in the past and what has been their successes and failures. Often we think, of course, that we are unique as an enterprise, but there are so many such learnings, I'm sure, which you can then adopt and embed into your own enterprise situation. So yeah, very very well said. The last learning for me, I mean, I'm really enjoying, by the way, this signature question we've been having in all of our episodes, and I loved even here the one given by Thomas, for example, where he said data is like Mary Kondo. For those of you who haven't uh, seen or heard of Mary Kondo, I mean, I know of it from the Netflix series which I saw a few years ago. But she comes to like these houses cluttered with a lot of items, clothes, etc., and kind of organizes it in a very nice way. And it's very right. Data is kind of the same in a lot of organizations. It's siloed, or it's in a format which is very difficult to understand and consume. So in a lot of ways, it's important to have that Mary Kondo approach for data so that it can be applied and used for different use cases rather than just be collected and kept in a form which is a, becoming expensive, but b, also becoming difficult for others in the organization to understand. So I love that analogy from him.
Yeah, these signature questions and personification of data brings out interesting responses. I would then share what Rudiger answered to this question when he talked about the wizard versus beast reality, right? And Rudiger highlighted the disconnect between this magic, which is the promised land of AI, the wizard, right? And the true difficulty of bringing in the data that is required to become successful in scaling of AI. And like he mentioned towards the beginning of our episode, is the lack of engineering kind of methodology for addressing data supply. So there is that gap that he sees, which he calls as the beast. That's why the wizard versus beast reality really struck me, and it was an interesting one that Rudiger brought up.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think with that, hope our listeners and viewers, you enjoyed the conversation today. You got some new perspectives, board members and the CEOs who are listening to this podcast. Hope you got more food for thought, real examples, and how to go about the challenges you are facing in your respective organizations. So we then close this episode here. We look forward to you joining our next episode of the podcast. So till then, take care and have a good time and see you in the next episode. Thank you for now.
Bye bye.
Bye.